Man, we're less than 48 hours out from the 2023 NFL Draft. Let's look at a quick mock draft here, starting out with the Carolina Panthers. I'm going with Bryce Young, quarterback out of Alabama. There's been some recent buzz. Maybe it'll be Will Levis. C.J. Stroud was initially the favorite. Anthony Richardson, always in the mix from Florida. But Bryce Young's been my top quarterback since the summer. I think the film backed it up this year. Young has a really athletic throwing motion and unique movements in the pocket. I think he's a point guard at the quarterback position, a really talented passer with unbelievable upside for the NFL. We'll restart the Panthers franchise from there. The Houston Texans have been in question the past few weeks, what they're going to do with the second overall pick. I'm going to stay true and take C.J. Stroud here. I think that's the best option for them at quarterback. He'd be an instant upgrade. His precision passing ability, his accurate touch, rhythmic throwing motion are all going to be really important for Houston. I've got an interesting pick for them at 12. I think they can really reinvent their offense if they go with Stroud here. Arizona is going to command a lot of trade value with that third pick. If someone's in love with Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, they could get a massive haul for that third pick and maybe not have to trade back that far. If they're selecting here, Will Anderson should be the pick, an immediate improvement for their pass rush. They have a unique defense. Guys like Zaven Collins, Isaiah Simmons, a lot of talent on that defense. Will Anderson gives them an immediate proven pass rusher. Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles defensive coordinator last year, Eagles led the NFL with 70 sacks. They never blitzed anyone besides their defensive line. They were always sending a four-man rush with the defensive ends getting after it. Will Anderson, an important piece to Jonathan Gannon's defense. The Indianapolis Colts at 4. This is an interesting pick. They could move up. They're in the market definitely for a quarterback. Let's go Anthony Richardson out of Florida here. Someone who has all the upside to be the best quarterback in this class, has superstar traits, but needs to clean up some things. Not the most accurate quarterback on the shorter passes. It's the swings, screens, hitches, where there's a lot of inconsistencies. I actually trust Richardson throwing the ball downfield more than I do short right now. But that's something that could get cleaned up in the NFL very easily. And his traits, his size, 6'4", 240 plus pounds, with his strong arm, physical running style, you can't teach those type of traits. He's going to be a menace in the red zone. I think this is going to be someone who can dominate in the red zone and really be successful. Maybe he sits for a little bit behind the likes of Gardner Minshew if it were to be the Colts, but Anthony Richardson has all the upside to be an NFL superstar. We've got Jalen Carter to the Seahawks at 5. If you're looking off the field concerns aside, Carter might be the best defensive player in this class. He's a game wrecker from that interior defensive line spot, a position with a lot of value, not a lot of interior defensive linemen considered in this range. Jalen Carter would be a game changer for the Seahawks, really solidify the middle of their defense. That's the theme for the Seahawks in this first round mock draft. We're going to solidify the middle of the defense and the middle of the interior offensive line with the 20th pick later on. First 5 picks shouldn't have surprised you that much. Let's go with Bryan Bresee to the Lions at number 6. A disruptive interior defensive lineman would really pair well with Aiden Hutchinson and what the Lions are building defensively overall. Love the way that secondary turned out this year. Bresee would give them a strong interior defensive line presence. I mentioned it for Carter. This is a position with a lot of value, and Bresee is a guy who's been a talented player for years. Was one of the top high school recruits when he signed with Clemson. Was a consistent playmaker for them. Didn't fall off a lot of times during that film. At 6'5", 298, really strong, disruptive presence, and has a lot of versatility as well. Not just a guy who's going to be a run stuffer, can win in a lot of ways in the pass game, can get to quarterbacks, has a lot of moves in his pass rush arsenal. He dealt with some injuries and some off-the-field stuff this year, but Bresee is definitely someone who's a first-round caliber player. I'm surprised there isn't more buzz on him. First offensive tackle off the board is Broderick Jones to the Las Vegas Raiders at 7. Jones might not be the most polished offensive tackle in this class. That might be Paris Johnson right now, but I love Jones's upside. I think this is a guy who's someone with an offensive line coach like the Raiders could really mold Jones into a superstar talent at the offensive line position. Love his athleticism, love the way he fires off the ball, really does a good job using his powerful upper body strength and proper technique. I think that's really going to translate to the NFL. Like I mentioned, a raw offensive lineman hasn't fully developed into what he will be, but I think he's a top 10 caliber pick, and I would like it for Jimmy G and the Raiders here at 7. Atlanta Falcons at 8. I'm going Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. There might be some hesitance to draft a third consecutive pass catcher after taking Kyle Pitts in 2020 and Drake London. But when you look at it, Jackson Smith-Njigba would really complement those big body targets well with his speed and athleticism and what he can do from the slot. And we know JSN has worked in talented receiver rooms before with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson in 2021 and last year with Marvin Harrison Jr. I think JSN would really give the Falcons a dynamic group of pass catchers, give Desmond Ridder every opportunity to be a talented NFL starting quarterback. I've heard a lot of Bijan Robinson buzz here to the Falcons. I'm a fan of Tyler Algier. They've still got Cordell Cordell Patterson on their roster, and there's a lot of talented running backs you can get later. JSN would be a game changer in the slot for the Falcons. I mentioned maybe Bijan could go to the Falcons at 8. I think the Bears at 9 makes a lot more sense. I've mocked him there. Haven't heard that a bunch. Heard a lot about 8, maybe 10 to the Eagles. How about in the middle of them, the Chicago Bears? I think he would give them a complete set of offensive weapons after getting DJ Moore this offseason, Chase Claypool during the season. You've already got Mooney and Kmet still on the roster, and then it creates a dynamic backfield with Justin Fields at quarterback. I think Bijan is one of the best players in the draft. I don't have to convince you of that. He's got a lot of unique talent at the running back position. One of these guys. We've heard a lot of arguments that Todd Gurley and Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, guys who have been drafted high in the first round. Look how it worked out for the teams. Every name I just mentioned right there, they got elite production out of those running backs for at least a few seasons. There was definitely production. Maybe it's not 8 years down the line, but for those first few years, we know when running backs are most valuable. It's in those first few years of their career. I think Bijan Robinson, there shouldn't be as much backlash as there has been just because running back is undervalued right now in the NFL. I think the Bears would be a great fit for him. I think the offensive line is better than you think in Chicago. I know it's not perfect. They might struggle at times, but there will be offensive linemen later as well. Going Bijan Robinson to the Bears. The Eagles got sniped there a little bit on Bijan, although I don't know if they'll take him even if he's available at 10 on Thursday. I'm going to go with Brian Branch, a defensive back out of Alabama. Another pick that would be a little uncharacteristic for the Eagles, but a fit that I think would really help their defense overall. After losing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson this offseason, Branch would provide that Swiss Army knife in the secondary, a guy who can line up at safety, can line up covering the slot, would be a really nice slot duo with Avonte Maddox if teams are trying to press the Eagles. I think Brian Branch would be a really nice pickup for the Eagles. He's also a really sound tackler, kind of a lost art at the safety and DB position. Really sound tackler, always around the football, constantly popping up on film, and then smooth in his coverage as well. Could really line up man-to-man in the slot with receivers. Love the versatility he would bring and the replacement he would be for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Admittedly, Tyree Wilson is way too low in this mock draft. He fell to 11 in mine. This is what I would do if I was the NFL general manager of every team. We're playing Madden here. If Tyree Wilson fell to 11 in the NFL draft on Thursday, I'd be very surprised. Really talented, versatile defensive lineman out of Texas Tech. A lot of power. He's a disruptive presence. Fit well in Mike Vrabel's 3-4 defense if this were to be what wound up happening. I think he'd be a good fit what Tennessee does overall. Played an outside linebacker role at Texas Tech. Could even contribute as a more traditional defensive lineman, even maybe on the interior. I mentioned it earlier. I think Houston could reinvent their offense by taking the best available quarterback here with C.J. Stroud, and at 12, taking one of the best available receivers in Jordan Addison out of USC. Really caught my eye in 2021 when he was playing with Kenny Pickett at Pitt. Was his favorite target there. Helped Kenny Pickett wind up being a first-rounder. Transferred to USC and helped Caleb Williams win the Heisman and start the 2024 draft as the favorite to go first overall. Addison's a really proven route runner, a guy who maybe doesn't have the biggest frame. That could be a knock on him, but we saw that coming out with Devontae Smith as well. I'm not overly concerned with that. I think his speed, athleticism, and ability to win and create separation for himself and proven history as a quarterback's best friend with Pickett and Williams, I think Jordan Addison immediately would provide that for C.J. Stroud in the NFL. Green Bay Packers at 13 just swapped this pick with the Jets during the Aaron Rodgers trade. Let's go Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. A lot of questions if the Packers will take a pass catcher this year. We have JSN and Addison off the board already. As high as I am on Zay Flowers, we'll see where he lands later in this mock. I like the idea of adding Michael Mayer, a big physical throwback style of tight end from Notre Dame. I think not only would he contribute helping Jordan Love with a big body pass catcher over the middle of the field, he would also provide a traditional throwback strong blocker for Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in what I think will be the Packers' strength next year offensively, running the football. New England at 14, they surprised a lot of people last year taking Cole Strange. I think they'll go Joey Porter Jr., cornerback out of Penn State this year. First corner off the board here in our mock draft. They could really use a lockdown corner on the perimeter. I like Miles Bryant on the inside. Jonathan Jones is a veteran who's played well, but adding in Joey Porter Jr. would really give them, a solid building block for the future of their secondary. A 6'2" corner out of Penn State, long rangy guy, had 11 pass deflections last year at Penn State. The son of former Steelers and Dolphins linebacker Joey Porter, currently a defensive coordinator in the XFL. Packers and Jets swap pick in the Rodgers trade. Jets here at 15. I'm going to go with Darnell Washington, tight end out of Georgia. It's a little bit higher than where a lot of people have him slotted in, but it's 6'7", 270 with his unique blend of athleticism and strength. I have no problem taking him here at the end of the top 15. I think he's a guy that Rodgers would really be a fan of and would pair well with their receiving core. Garrett Wilson's obviously a superstar. Allen Lazard was a really nice pickup. You throw Darnell Washington in there as well. I like the idea of that. Also would help them out in their run game with Breece Hall and that talented backfield they have, also featuring Zonovan Knight. Darnell Washington almost has offensive line size and really developed as a blocker throughout his time at Georgia, with Brock Bowers, a top 10 pick next year, leading the way at tight end over the past 2 seasons. I just mentioned Darnell Washington. I have him mocked a little bit higher than most. Cam Smith here at 16 to the Washington Commanders is a guy I have a little bit higher than most, but just a guy that I've been a fan of throughout this process. At 6'1", really physical presence and press coverage. I love his mentality as a DB. He has the right mentality to succeed in the NFL. Long arms, plays the position with impressive toughness. I think he would fit in really well next to or opposite Kendall Fuller in the Commanders secondary. Obviously, the NFC East, probably the best group of quarterbacks in the NFC when you're looking at Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones. Adding Cam Smith would only help the Commanders oppose that. Steelers here at 17. Paris Johnson Jr. would be a great pick for them. There's been buzz he could go as high to 3 to Arizona. There's buzz he could be a top 10 pick. I would not be mad at it at all. He's one of my favorite tackles in this class. I went Broderick Jones at 7. I think there's a little bit more upside. There's maybe a bit of a higher ceiling. Paris Johnson definitely has a higher floor, though. This is going to be a guy who's successful in the NFL. Loved Ohio State's duo of tackles with him and DeJuan Jones. I think for Pittsburgh, it'd be a great pick. Help Kenny Pickett, their first-round pick last year. Johnson protected C.J. Stroud at Ohio State. Stroud was hardly touched this year. Like I mentioned, that offensive tackle duo was great at Ohio State. Throw him to Pittsburgh, flip him from Ohio to Pittsburgh. Not sure everybody in Ohio is going to love that, but Pittsburgh will learn to love him quick. Detroit Lions here at 18. They traded TJ Hawkinson in the division to Minnesota last year. Still don't love that trade. But let's replace Hawkinson here with Dalton Kincaid, third tight end off the board. Not a knock on him at all. Certainly the best yards after catch threat and maybe the best pass catcher out of all these tight ends. Like I mentioned, a yard after catch threat, 890 yards and 8 touchdowns last season at Utah. Was a really nice piece for Dalton Rising in that offense. Replace Hawkinson, go out and get a tight end with your second pick here. So that's Brian Bresee and Dalton Kincaid for the Lions. Probably not what you've seen in a lot of mocks. Not even sure if that'll happen, but that's what I would do if I was talking to Dan Campbell. All right, so I mentioned with the Lions, maybe those 2 picks aren't the most likely to happen. I think here at 19, the Buccaneers, they very likely might draft Darnell Wright, offensive tackle out of Tennessee. With Tristan Wirfs moving to left tackle, I think Wright could slide in at right tackle and have a similar type of career trajectory that Wirfs had. A guy who made 42 starts at Tennessee, finished his career with 19 consecutive starts without allowing a sack. Darnell Wright really improved this season, played some left tackle last year. This year was a full-time right tackle, did a good job anchoring that offense. Tennessee had a really explosive offense, and Darnell Wright really did a good job anchoring that, helping them get some lanes going for the running game. I mentioned it earlier, the idea here for Seattle is to improve the interior of your defensive line. You did that with Jalen Carter. Let's flip to the other side of the ball and improve it with O'Cyrus Torrence, an offensive guard out of Florida. Torrence would add to a really impressive duo in Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, the offensive tackles the Seahawks drafted last year. Torrence immediately solidifies the inside, pairs well next to them, has a really big frame, puts defensive linemen kind of in a phone booth with his wide frame and his strong lower body base. I'm a fan of O'Cyrus Torrence. A lot of people say this might not be the best interior offensive line class. I kind of disagree. I think Torrence is one of the best. Chargers here at 21. Let's go Kalijah Kancey, a defensive tackle out of Pittsburgh, an explosive interior presence with a great get-off and motor. A lot of people have him as the second best defensive tackle behind Jalen Carter. I'm a Bresee fan, but I love Kancey as well. It's not a knock on Kancey as well. That motor and that get-off, that's exactly what you're looking for from the interior defensive line. You're not going to catch me questioning his size at 6'1", 281. Not a problem for me. Love interior defensive linemen who have that low center of gravity, play with a low pad pad level and win the point of contact. And that's exactly who Calijah Kancey is. A guy who recorded 14.5 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks last season at Pitt. His quickness and disruptiveness is too talented to overlook. Maybe the Chargers want to add to what they have for Justin Herbert on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, Austin Eckler is a question mark at running back. We are going to address that in the second round with Chase Brown out of Illinois. Maybe they want to look at a tight end. I'm a fan of Donald Parham, and our top 3 tight ends are off the board. As high as I am on Tucker Kraft, Calijah Kancey, too good to overlook. I mentioned him earlier for the Packers. We're going to go Zay Flowers here at 22 to the Baltimore Ravens. Try to entice Lamar a little bit more. We got Odell. Now let's add Zay Flowers. A really well-rounded room for Lamar. It'd be the best group of pass catchers he's ever had. Obviously, Mark Andrews is still there. Zay Flowers, a really complete receiver. Even at his size, this is a guy who can play multiple spots, can be a deep threat. I think he would have immediate success in the slot in the NFL. These next 2 corners are 2 guys I feel should have been off my mock draft earlier. Let's start it out with Devin Witherspoon, corner out of Illinois, heading to the Vikings here, helping them out after they lost Patrick Peterson to the Steelers this offseason. Witherspoon's a really physical corner, very sound tackler in the run game, one of the best tackling corners I've seen in the draft in the last few years. Was the Big Ten's defensive back this year, recorded 3 interceptions at Illinois. Really well-rounded guy. I mentioned his ability as a tackler, also very smooth in coverage. I think this is a guy with a lot of upside. People have kind of been trying to move him to safety a little bit. I see him as a corner. I like his footwork. I like his smooth, fluid hips in coverage. And then at 24, we've got Christian Gonzalez to the Jacksonville Jaguars, a really talented corner who has buzz as high as maybe the 3rd pick to Arizona, 7th to Las Vegas. Could be a top 10 guy. I'm slotting him here at 24 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Just a bit of a personal preference with guys like Joey Porter Jr., Cam Smith, just a little bit more my style, physical, press coverage corners. Gonzalez has the frame for that at 6'1", the arm length for it. Just really more his athleticism and fluid movements that catch my eye when I watch him. Certainly not a knock on him. Unique athleticism at his size. 25 here to the Giants. I've liked this one for a while. Quentin Johnston, wide receiver out of TCU, big body target coming in there in that 6'3" range. I think he'd pair well with the likes of Isaiah Hodgins and then guys like Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, who's going to have a big season this year, and then veteran Jamison Crowder. Those last 3 guys, more slot guys. I think you put Johnston and Hodgins on the outside, and then Wan'Dale Robinson can take that next step, or you have veterans like Slayton and Crowder to complement those 2 young, talented receivers. I like the idea of it. Johnson was TCU's top pass catcher this year, 60 receptions, 1,069 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think he has a lot of upside for the NFL, a vertical threat, some things he needs to polish a little bit more. My 4th receiver off the board here, but a guy who I think the Giants would like. Dallas at 26, they have more pressing needs, but I think they would like DeJuan Jones. He's a Cowboys type of pick, an offensive tackle with 6'8", nearly 360 pounds. I think he'd complement Tyler Smith really well. Their offensive tackle they drafted last year in the 1st round from Tulsa. Not exactly the same type of player. They have different frames and builds. DeJuan Jones would be a really nice complement to that at right tackle, though. Could sit behind Tyrone Smith, the Cowboys' legendary offensive tackle this year, if they consider Jones isn't ready. I mentioned Jones earlier when I was talking about Paris Johnson at 17 to the Steelers. DeJuan was another part that really helped keep C.J. Stroud nice and clean this year. I like this one a lot. Buffalo Bills at 27. Take Jameer Gibbs, running back out of Alabama. Didn't exactly get what you were hoping for from the Devin Singletary and Zach Moss duo these past few years. Let's restart the running back room. Let's put a home run threat next to Josh Allen, a guy with 1,800 all-purpose yards at Georgia Tech back in 2021 where he first caught my eye. That Georgia Tech film is a lot of fun to watch. That wasn't the best team, but Jameer Gibbs was the best player on the field in a lot of instances. Transferred to Alabama in 2022 and continued to have success in that SEC competition. His elusiveness in the open field, upside as a pass catcher. I really love his upside for the NFL. I think he'd add to an already impressive group of weapons for Josh Allen. Ji'Ayir Brown here at 28 to the Bengals, probably higher than a lot of people have him in their mocks. Ji'Ayir Brown's been a my guy for a while. I think he's an NFL-ready safety right now, an NFL-caliber safety. Coming out of Penn State, mentioned it with Joey Porter at 14 to the Patriots. Ji'Ayir Brown, I think he would really do a nice job replacing Jesse Bates in that Bengals defense. I think he's that quality of safety. He'd fit in well with their defense. The Bengals secondary has never been a strength. Even in their Super Bowl run, that was really what cost them against the Rams. Get an NFL caliber safety to replace your best player you just lost in free agency to the Falcons. Ji'Ayir Brown's a guy who had 6 interceptions at Penn State, recorded 10 in the past 2 seasons. A guy with good instincts, really fluid in coverage, has a knack for being around the football. Complimented Jaquan Brisker really well in 2021. I think he'd be a great fit for the Bengals. Here at 29, I've got Nolan Smith, an edge rusher out of Georgia. This one hurt me to do because I think Nolan Smith is a top 15 caliber player. Just the way my mock wound up falling. Obviously, you guys saw Tyree Wilson was there at 11 to the Titans. Nolan Smith just wound up falling, but this is a home run for the Saints. I think this would be a great pick for them, a team that could use some additional help on their defensive line, add a talented edge rusher like Nolan Smith, an outstanding performance at the Combine, and an impressive body of work. This season, he played in 8 games before suffering a torn pectoral that ended his season. Nolan Smith's a guy who has all the athleticism, all the traits that NFL teams are looking for, and then a history of success, a body of work at Georgia, and then was the top prospect in the 2019 high school class coming out of IMG Academy. Eagles are back on the clock at 30, added Brian Branch, a versatile DB out of Alabama earlier. Let's go ahead and add a versatile linebacker out of Clemson, Trenton Simpson. Trenton's coming to Philly. Simpson's a versatile outside linebacker utilized at Clemson in several different ways, multiple different schemes, versatility. He has the ability to play in multiple different schemes, I should say. Can play as that traditional run stuffer who drops into coverage at outside linebacker, but also provides an explosive presence as an edge rusher or on just traditional linebacker blitzes. I think he would really complement and complete the skill sets that Nakobe Dean and Nicholas Moreau already bring to the Eagles linebacker room. 2 more traditional middle linebackers. Add a versatile guy like Trenton Simpson who you can move all over the field. I think that would be great for the Eagles' new look defense. And then concluding the first round, let's go with the Kansas City Chiefs taking Jalen Hyatt, a deep threat, a vertical threat for Patrick Mahomes, receiver out of Tennessee. I think a guy with 4.4 speed, caught 5 touchdowns versus Alabama. That's going to catch your eye off the bat. Those are 2 really enticing things. You really put on Hyatt's film, though. This is a guy with track type of speed, really can win vertically, does a good job. His first step off the line of scrimmage is very quick and concise. Doesn't always create the best separation for himself in all of his routes, but I love the way he flies off the ball